Hey, what's up guys? Today we're going to be taking a look at this GTX 1060 3 gig graphics card. We're going to see, does it have what it takes to play games nowadays? Because I know a lot of guys are having a hard time trying to find graphics cards because the prices are outrageous or there's just not any new cards available right now. So we're going to be taking a look at this card, you've seen some benchmarks and just kind of overall performance and seeing if it's, worth looking into. So I'll just start off by saying I paid $100 for this card here. So most 1060 6 gigs are going to go for probably double that, but I found someone who wasn't just trying to make a buck off the situation, was selling it for a reasonable enough price, which is about right. I got a 1070 a while back for 150 and a 1060 for about 100 is reasonable. So if you find it anywhere in the $200 $300 range, that's not going to be unheard of, considering everything's garbage land right now, and you either get a crappy card for way too much or you buy a good card and you pay 3 times the MSRP. So this right here is just the Asus version 3 gig. It's a pretty mid-tier card. It's in a decent cooler, nothing super quiet, nothing crazy for overclocking. It's got a pretty basic heatsink design, nothing crazy for cooling solutions. It's about the same size as an ATX board, so you should be able to fit it in most builds. And let's just go ahead and take a look at the benchmarks of this card and seeing if it does okay for gaming despite being a little bit of a lower end and older card. So before we start the benchmarks, I'll just go over my system specifications. So I got an i7 6700K. It's overclocked just a couple hundred megahertz, nothing crazy, and then 16 gigs of DDR4 3200 RAM, and that's pretty much all we're going to be using to test this system. So it is a kind of a mid-range system for nowadays, but you could use this card with a little bit older system, maybe even a DDR3 system, and still have relatively decent performance. So now let's not waste any time and let's see how this thing does in some games. So we're going to start the tests off here with some Call of Duty Cold War. So I'm just going to be playing some Outbreak here. It should be pretty similar to multiplayer or if you were playing Warzone. So let's just go ahead through the settings here. We have it kind of set at kind of a medium and high mixture. So it's definitely a good looking game still, and it will play at a pretty solid FPS. So we shouldn't have a problem with the settings and how it looks. We do have anti-aliasing on as well, so pretty decent, I guess, settings overall. And just getting into the gameplay here, you can see that it is having, no trouble at all maintaining 40 FPS, sometimes 50, with the occasional drops down to 30 once you get into a really intense situation, but doesn't struggle at all to play at a really nice frame rate. And there is some room to bump down the settings in case you do, say, want a solid 60 just about all the time. So moving into some Cyberpunk 2077, this is kind of an unoptimized game. And yes, you can see here we got the settings pretty much as low as they'll go. It's still 1080p with 100% resolution, so I think the game honestly looks not bad at all for low settings, but it is a harder game to run, so we're going to have to take a bit of a sacrifice here. And we can get about a solid 30 frames, occasional drops just below 30, but sometimes staying above 30, so does struggle a little bit, but the game is still perfectly playable. And I played this game completely through on my 970, which was about the same FPS, and I didn't have a single problem at all. So you should still have some fun playing this game. Moving into some Red Dead Redemption 2, we're running the game at 1080p medium settings with a couple set on high. So overall, pretty decent graphical experience, and you will see that we are running pretty good frames per second as well. We do have anti-aliasing on a little bit as well, so the game is going to look fairly well, and it's also going to play quite decently. So getting into the gameplay here, you can see that we don't have any problem getting 50 frames per second. That's kind of about the average, is high 40s, just around 50. So game looks good and it's a pretty fluid experience. It's not really a kind of game that you're going to need 60 frames absolutely all the time. You can play it a little bit lower if you are okay with that as well, but pretty good experience nonetheless. Next on the list is some Battlefield 5, and we're just going to go into the settings here, and you can see we're running 1080p Ultra preset, so pretty much the maximum settings you could be running, and it does seem to be playing pretty good. As you can see here, it's 50 FPS, absolutely no problem, kind of hovering a little above and below it depending on what you're doing, but for the most part a very playable experience, and the game does look quite good as well. Then we're moving into some Beam NG Drive, and that is, I wouldn't say a super graphically demanding game, but it is a little bit more CPU dependent than GPU dependent. But we're going to be playing this game 1080p, you know, high settings, whatever, and you can see that the card does have no problem at all playing above 60 frames per second. So it is a pretty decent game in my opinion, but you will be more CPU bound than GPU bound, but it's still fully utilizing the card and it's playing at above 60 frames. So next up is Grand Theft Auto 5, and although it still be, you know, a pretty old game, a lot of people still do play it, so this card at all doesn't have a single problem running it. We can run it at max settings with, you know, anti-aliasing on as well, 1080p, and it doesn't even struggle at all. So we'll just go ahead and play a little bit here, and you can see that we don't have any problem getting above 60 frames per second. I mean, it can hold 70, occasional drops just below 60, getting really intense. So, you know, not a problem at all. In this game, you can run max settings all day long. So in terms of fan noise and temperatures for this particular card, I was getting around 74 degrees Celsius for an average when I was gaming, which is fairly high, but then again, it did keep it at a pretty low fan speed, and it did maintain that 74 degrees pretty well, which is totally a safe temperature for the card. So that's not bad. I'm fairly happy with that, and that's just for reference for, I guess, a similar design cooler. So you've seen those games and you've seen the performance they got, and I guess you can speak for yourself whether you think this card is worth it or not for you. Personally, I think that this card still has its place in today's world for, you know, a 1080p, decent settings, decent frame rate card. If you just want to load up a game, reasonable settings, play it, enjoy yourself, and have fun, this card will have absolutely no problem doing that. Now, I personally use a GTX 1070. I've been using that for the past couple months, and I think it's, you know, miles ahead of this card, but I would have no problem using this 1060 for whatever games I'd want to play without, you know, any sort of struggle at all. So I think it's still a pretty reasonable card nowadays, and if there's any other games you might want me to test or anything like that, leave them in the comments below. And I guess that's pretty much all for this video. I wish you luck in your graphics card journey nowadays, and that's pretty much all. So see you guys later. Have a great day.